Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my respectful obeisances. Our glories to His confounder Charya, His Divine Grace, Laisi Bhakti Vedanta Swami, Patita Pavan Jagaguru Srila Prabhupada. Our glories to our dear spiritual masters, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Tita Swami, Srila Gurudev Krishna Pad. Our obeisances to all of the Vaishnavas assembled on the platform. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Just a minute. Okay. Sorry, devotees. So, Hare Krishna. Nadavat Pranam. Thank you all for assembling. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, there's some little technical issues. I think we're good to go now. So, sorry for the little bit technical issues at the beginning. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Yeah, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Sorry, the YouTube was also on, so I think it was interacting. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritam. Narayashaivam. Narottama. Devi Sarasvati Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Mastapraisu Abhadrisu Nityam Bhagavatam Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttamansloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, chapter 13, text number 25. So we'll read the Sanskrit text, the transliteration, synonyms, and Srila Prabhupada translation and Srila Prabhupada's purport. Tasya pitalva deho yaham kripanasya jijiviso paraiti anichato ojrino jaraya vasasi iva. Tasya pitalva deho yaham kripanasya jijiviso paraiti anichato jirnoho jaraya vasasi iva. Tasya pitarva deho yaham kripanasya jijivisoho paraiti anichato jirno jaraya vasasi iva. Word for word translation. Tasya of this. Happy in spite of. Tava, your. Deha, body. I am this. Kripan asya of one who is misali. Jijiviso of you who desire life. Paraiti will dwindle. Anechataha, even unwilling. Jelna, deteriorated. Jaraya, old. Vasasi, garments. Iva, like. Translation by Evangelist Laisiba Tudente Swami Prabhupada. Despite your unwillingness to die and your desire to live, even at the cost of honor and prestige, your miserly body will certainly dwindle and deteriorate like an old garment. Purport by His Evangelist Laisiba Tudente Swami Patita Pavan Jagagrishla Prabhupada. The words Kripana Asya Jijiv Veso are significant. There are two classes of men. One is called the Kripana, and the other is called the Brahmana. The Kripana, or the miserly man, has no estimation of his material body, but the Brahmana has a true estimation of himself and the material body. The Kripana, having a wrong estimation of his material body, wants to enjoy sense gratification with his utmost strength, and even in old age, he wants to become a young man by medical treatment or otherwise. Dhritarashtra is addressed herein as a Kripana because without any estimation of his material body, he wants to live at any cost. Vidura is trying to open his eyes to see that he cannot live more than his term and that he must prepare for death. Since death is inevitable, why should he accept such a humiliating position for living? It is better to take the right path, even at the risk of death. Human life is meant for finishing all kinds of miseries of material existence. And life should be so regulated that one can achieve the desired goal. Dhritarashtra, due to his wrong conception of life, had already spoiled 80% of his achieved energy. So it behooved him to utilize the remaining days of his miserly life for the ultimate good. Such a life is called miserly because one cannot properly utilize the asset of the human form of life. Only by good luck does such a miserly man meet a self-realized soul like Vidura, and by his instruction gets rid of the nescience of material existence. Oma Gyanam Timiran Dasya Gyanam Gyanam Chala Akaya Shakshu Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Nama Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Dadati Swam Pada Antikam. Hey Krishna Karuna Shindu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vindavane Eshwari Drishabhano Shuchadevi Pranamamin Haripriye Mokam Karoti Bachalam Pangam Lagayate Girim Yadkripat Ambande Sri Guru Dinatarina Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vaishnava Thakur ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam class ki jai. Hare Krishna. So once again, let's read the text of today. Tasya pitavate oyaham kripanasya jijiviso paraiti anichato ojrino jaraya vasasi iva. Despite your unwillingness to die and your desire to live even at the cost of honor and prestige, your miserly body will certainly dwindle and deteriorate like an old garment. Hare Krishna. So we thank once again all of the devotees, first for the opportunity that we've been given to render this service of speaking and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. My obeisances unto the Param Guru Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Jagaguru Prabhupada, our dear spiritual master Srila Bhakti Swami Gurudev Krishna Pad, and to all the senior God brothers and sisters who are assembled on the platform, and all of the devotees. We pray that this rendition of service may be a source of purification for ourselves and for all of those who might be opportune to hear, both on this platform and probably on the other social media platform where this live class is being live streamed. So today we're discussing the continuation of the Celestial Quitting Home, and Vidura is speaking to King Dhritarashtra, about the very important subject matter. And what is that subject matter? It is subject matter that actually relates to all the living entities in this material world. In the material world, according to the Vedic scriptures, there are three things that exist: the Supreme Lord, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is manifested in so many ways. And the second is the material energy, or the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of the three modes of material nature. And as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the third energy is that Tataksha Shakti, or the marginal living entity. The living entities who are all spread in different kinds of bodies in 8,400,000 species of life. And the interactions of all of this is what makes the world exist. In this verse we're reading, we've been following the storyline of Dhritarashtra's activities, his birth, but particularly this verse is particularly talking about two subjects, or two kinds of persons that exist in this material world. The Kripana and the Brahmana. In other words, in the material world, all living entities spread across the 8,400,000 species of life are divided into two kind of categories. Excuse me. Those who are Kripana or Maisali, or those who are Brahmana. These are the two categories of living entities that exist in this material world. There may be so many divisions, but essentially, every living entity in the material world is divided into these two categories. And this verse specifically is trying to tell us that for whatever reason, we should never take the position of a Maisa or a Kripana. In the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and all of our Vedic scriptures, there is several quotations where the word Kripana is being used. And wherever this word comes up, the advice is always that one should never become a Maisa or a Kripana. And who is a Kripana? A Masali-minded person. In a material context, when you say someone is a Maisa, it means someone who doesn't want to give, or who is reluctant to give. But in this context, the word Kripana means something more deeper than that. A Kripana is somebody who is the enemy of himself. And who is the enemy of himself? Somebody who is ignorant of his original identity. And that is why in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, text number 7, Lord Krishna, he told Arjuna, when he was about to start the discussion, Arjuna himself explained what the symptom of a Kripana is. When he said, Kapanyu, dosu pahata swabhava, Prishami twam dharma samoda sheta, Yatshreyasyan nisitam bruhitame, Sisiasteham, Sadimam Twam Prapanam, very popular verse. It is a point where Arjun expresses the symptom of a Kripana or a Maisadi-minded person. Although Arjun, in his original Swarup, is not a Maisadi person, but for the purpose of teaching the living entities in general, Arjun assumed this position so that the revelation about the Maisadi-minded person can be revealed. Arjun said to Lord Krishna, after speaking so many philosophies, just like in the material world, the living entities are so many philosophies to explain or to express himself in different circumstances at any stages of life. Arjun said, now I'm confused about my duty and I've lost all composure because of my Maisali weakness. The word Maisali is used there. Because of my Maisali weakness. And in that condition, I'm asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I'm your disciple and the soul surrendered unto you. So in this verse, Arjun is explaining to us who is a Maisa and what a Maisa person should do. And that too is encapsulated in this particular verse we're reading today. A Maisali-minded person is somebody who is ignorant in essence. It means an ignorant person, one who does not know. The difference between a Brahmana and a Kripana is that a Brahmana, by the 12 qualities of a Brahmanical person, is an individual who lives in a material body, but he has knowledge of things as they are. In other words, a Maisali-minded person is one who does not know, an ignorant person. And what a Maisa should do is what Arjun is telling in the verse. When we look at the purport of that verse, 2:7, Srila Prabhupada mentioned something in that purport. He said that by nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. In other words, for one who has taken material body, unless one becomes a transcendentalist or a teacher pragya or somebody who is identified as a Brahmin. In the material world, material activity always gives all kinds of perplexities in every step. And how does one express that perplexity? It is explained that one who is in a perplexed situation in life is busy with engaging in activities which are completely outside of his own self-interest. He engages in such activities that actually put him in a very uncomfortable situation. There's a popular musician in Nigeria of a blessed memory, Fela Anikulapo. There was a song he sang several years back, and he said, the lyrics of that song is suffering and smiling. And I never understand the meaning of that song until when I became a devotee. Because one wonders, how can somebody be suffering at the same time be smiling? It's a kind of a paradox that somebody is suffering and is smiling. Our experience in life is that somebody is suffering, he never smiles. His eyes is shook, he shook his eyes, tightened his face, he's lamenting. But Fela sang, he said, suffering and smiling. This is the nature of a Maisali, a Kripana. A Kripana, although he's suffering, but he's smiling because what? He's in a deluded state of consciousness. He considered himself to be what he is not. And therefore, he engages in those activities that has no relationship with him. So therefore, he's suffering. But in that delusion state, just like a madman on the street, a madman, he sleeps in the gutter. He carries rotten food in the garbage. He starts eating it, and he thinks he's enjoying. And this is a Maisali nature. He sees the bodily disease as brothers, uncle, mother, father, wife, as a very glorious thing. And he suffers from the beginning of his life to the end of his life, trying to maintain, even when he cannot do it. Lord Krishna, he emphasized that in the Bhagavad Gita. In every scripture, every part of the scripture, there is a scriptural evidence that the living entity has no control over anything. We don't even have the control over our speech. We all have had an experience at one point. We want to say something, we add something in our mind, and what comes off our mouth is different thing. That is the nature of a living conditioned soul in the material world. But then, a Maisali man does not recognize this, does not realize this. Just like Arjuna exhibited in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, he has a situation which Prabhupada described as a perplexed situation, a state of perplexity. That is what we experience in the material world. How to eat, how to sleep, how to defend, how to make all the activities of a conditioned soul who is in a gross level of conditional life, which is synonymous to that of animalistic life. And in ways to do this, although he has this material body, Lord Krishna says, Samsara Mahabahu, in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 7:4, in that verse where Krishna described the constitution of the 8 elements that constitute the material body. Bumi apo nalova yo kamano budi vasha ankara bina prakriti ashtada. Then he goes further in the next verse. He said, "Aparayam itastu ayam bina prakriti ashtada jiva bhuta mahabahu yayidam daryate jagat." The living entity, although is superior to material energy, to the material body, to the material senses, due to illusion, he conditioned himself and he lives under the service of this body and the extended bodily disease throughout his life. And that is what Dhritarashtra is doing here. And when he is suffering, like Fela said, when he is grossly suffering like anything, like in the life that is demonstrated in the life of Dhritarashtra, Dhritarashtra all his life, he was struggling to enthrone himself. But by dint of karma, he is already defeated. He cannot be a king. And even though he cannot be a king, he wants to be a king by extension, by wanting his offspring to become a king. And he continuously makes schemes. The living entity are like this. We continuously make schemes, forgetting that nothing is under the control of the living entity in the material world. This is the life of a Kripana. A Kripana is always making arrangement and making so much arrangement to enjoy, forgetting that he is not the order. So when Arjuna expressed that verse, Lord Krishna responded by smiling. And why is Lord Krishna smiling? A friend of you is telling you, I'm having a challenge, and you're smiling. It looks as if you are taunting that person. But Lord Krishna was not laughing or taunting him just for laughing, but he was actually laughing at his ignorance. It is said that the cause of all forms of suffering that we express in this material world is as a result of ignorance. And the most amazing thing is that even when we get into religious life, or even higher than that, we get into Krishna consciousness, sometimes we still express this ignorance at a very high level. And there is an example of that in the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, we see in the 3rd canto, chapter 31, text number 17, when Lord Kapila was instructing about the nature of the living entity, he mentioned in that verse, it described the situation from the verse 1 of that verse. Actually, it's a very interesting verse in the 3rd canto. He said, particularly in text number 17, said, having fallen into a pool of blood, stool, and urine within the abdomen of his mother, the living entity, his own body scorched by the mother's gastric fire, the embodied soul, anxious to get out, counts his months and prays, "Oh my Lord, when shall I, a wretched soul, be released from this confinement?" That is the situation. But in the purport, the Prabhupada gave a very nice explanation in the purport of that verse, Prabhupada said the word Kripana D is significant in this verse. D means intelligence, and Kripana means miserly. Conditional life is for persons who are miserly intelligent or who do not properly utilize their intelligence in the human form of life. This intelligence is developed, and one has to utilize that developed intelligence to get out of the cycle of repeated birth and death. One who does not do so is a miser, just like a person who has immense wealth but does not utilize his wealth properly. Thank you, Sadi, for bringing out the verse. So that's what Prabhupada is explaining. One who does so is a miser. But how do you understand that even on the platform of Krishna consciousness, sometimes we find this kind of a miser? In another verse, in the same Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada, when the Srimad Bhagavatam, we add the story of Puranjana, how he became a woman in his next life. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 28, verse number 7. King Puranjana, we all have the story of King Puranjana. And I won't go too much into details of that because we have the stories. But King Puranjana, in that verse, it is mentioned that King Puranjana saw that everything in his own town was scattered and that his son, grandson, servants, and ministers were all gradually opposing him. He also noted that his wife was becoming cold and indifferent. This is what is happening to Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra is seeing his material body is falling. His whole complete body is falling apart. His teeth has removed. He has become weak. Everything is falling apart. But yet, because he is a perfect example of a miserly person, he is engaging in struggling seriously to maintain the material body for enjoyment. And Prabhupada said something interesting in that purport. He said, although he has wasted 80% of his life, he has only 20% left. Instead of taking advantage of this 20%, he still continue to become, remain in that miserly. And that is what happens to us in devotional service. When we look at the purport of that verse we just quoted, Prabhupada mentioned very nicely in that purport. Prabhupada said, when one, in the last paragraph of that purport, Prabhupada said, when one becomes an invalid, his senses and organs are weakened. In other words, they are no longer under one's control. The senses and sense objects then begin to oppose him, just like we see in the life of Dhritarashtra now. When a person is in a distressed condition, even his family members, his sons, grandsons, and wife, they become disrespectful. When is this man going to die, sir? The Baba is, and in the West, they don't even worry. They just take him to old age house. Papa continuing the Bible, he said, they no longer are under the command of the master of the house. Just as we wish to use our senses for sense gratification, the senses also require strength for the body in reciprocation. Papa continuing, a man keeps a family for enjoyment. And similarly, family members demand enjoyment from the head of the family. When they do not receive sufficient money from him, they grow disinterested and ignore his command or desires. This is all due to once being a Kripana, miser. This word Kripana, used in the 6th verse, is in opposition to the word Brahmana. In the human form of life, one should become a Brahmana, which means that one should understand the constitutional position of the absolute truth, trans-truth Brahmana, and then engage its service as a Vaishnava. We get this facility in human form of life. Before we go further to the life of a Brahmana, let us continue a little bit further in this line of thoughts. So Prabhupada is explaining, just like this Rasta here, the living entity, when it gets into that situation, instead of realizing the situation is misfortune, we all have these experiences. When the head of the family, the father, becomes weak, he no longer can provide for the family. If he is lucky, if he's born in Africa, he may get some little care. And that care is, oh, Baba is disturbing us. When will this Baba die? This is what he experiences. And if it is not said to, oh, Baba is going to call me, then he puts his phone on silence. And when the old man calls and calls and calls, he's tired. And out of anger, sometimes the old man will curse him. He said, your son will do like that for you. It's very common in Africa. You see, the old man staying like that, out of pain. But when one is like this, in essence, what the verse is saying that we should never in any circumstances become a Master. And even in devotional service, when we come to devotional service, how we become a Master is explained in the further verse. In the life of a good example of how we become miserly, even when in the part of spirituality is given in the life of King Barat. King Barat was almost on the platform of Baba. He has renounced, just like us. We've renounced family, we've renounced friends, we've renounced society, whatever the society enjoys, meat eating, flesh intake. Unless one has come to a very high level, we all have an experience when we're starting the part of Bhakti, how difficult it is to maintain these principles. And after giving up all of this, just like King Bharat, he has given up everything. He has renounced everything. He renounced the kingdom he has. He renounced his opulence. Most of us have not been able to attain that level. We're still so strongly attached to our money, to our wife, to our son, to our bodily family. But King Bharat, he has renounced all of this. But what happens to him? King Bharat, in the form of in the form of attachment, maintaining the mind of a miserly, he became attached to a deer. And it is said that King Bharat, he went. Let's go to that verse. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto. I think yes, it should be 5th canto, chapter 8, text number 9. I think that is it. Yeah, it is speaking of my Bharat. King Bharat, Maharaj Bharat, he began to think. And how does he start thinking? He starts saying, this helpless young deer, by the force of time, an agent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, see the philosophy. Just let us listen to the statement. He said, he knows that he's the personality of Godhead. He has lost his relatives and friends and has taken shelter of me. He does not know anyone but me. As I have become his father, mother, brother, and relatives, this deer is thinking in this way, and it has full faith in me. It does not know anyone. He said, it does not know anyone but me, brother, and relatives. This deer is thinking in this way, and it has full faith in me. It does not know anyone but me. Therefore, I should not be envious and think that for the deer my own welfare will be destroyed. I should certainly raise, protect, gratify, and fondle it. When it has taken shelter with me, how can I neglect it? Even though the deer is disturbing my spiritual life, I realize that a helpless person who has taken shelter cannot be neglected. That would be a great fault. You see the philosophy. When you go into the purport of that verse, you will realize what Papa said there. This is what happens to one who even is on the path of transcendence, and we see it happen in our lives. Although we take to the path of Christian consciousness, we start following the regulative principle, we start chanting the holy name. But by dint of this same miserly mindedness, we lost the path. And then what happens to King Bharat at the last moment of his life? He lost control. And what happened in his next life? He became a deer. But by the dint of good fortune, because of his practice of Krishna consciousness, he got the opportunity in the deer body that was attached to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and was able to rectify. But you can imagine how long it is. I don't think any one of us here wants to become a cat or a dog or a deer in our next life. We know what happens to those living entities. So that's how one becomes a kripanam. If even on the part of spirituality, one should avoid it by all means. In contrast with that, the verse we're reading says that we should become a Brahmana. Who is a Brahmana? A Brahmana is an epitome of knowledge. He knows what to do, how to do, when to do, and what not to do. In the Bhagavad Gita chapter 18, text number 58, Lord Krishna, he told Arjuna, he said, if you listen to me, you will overcome all the perplexities that Prabhupada is mentioning in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. The material world is full of perplexities, even in our own spiritual life. But that perplexity, Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 1858, he said, if you follow, how does one follow the Lord Krishna? Unless one knows the Supreme Personality of God. Unless one knows the Supreme Personality of God, he cannot follow his instruction. Technospark B8P, please, could you unmute yourself, please? Okay, Chaitanya Prabhuji, welcome. So one should become a Brahmana. And a Brahmana is he who knows. In 1858 and 59, it gives us a contrast of the difference between one who knows and who does not know. And how do you know that? A person who does not know, he does not know what to do and what not to do. In purport of that verse, Prabhupada explained that such a person, look, as Krishna himself said in that verse of the Bhagavad Gita, such a person is definitely going to be lost. But one who knows, which is the symptom of a Brahmana, because he knows, Lord Krishna declared in that verse of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, he said that what? Such a person, Lord Krishna, I just want to read that verse directly from so yeah, Machita Sarva Dugani. Yeah, Machita Sarva Duguna Makmasada Tarisiasi. Attache Tuam Ahankara, Nasosiasi, Binanxiasi. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditional life by my grace. If however you do not work in such a consciousness, but act through force, it will not bring a hearing me, you become lost. And the Prabhupada said in the purport, a person in full Krishna consciousness is not unduly anxious about executing the duties of his existence. Why? Because he is on the platform of Krishna consciousness. And in the next verse, Lord Krishna continued instructing Arjuna. He said, in contrast to the verse, he said, Yad Ahankaram Asrityaha na yatsya iti man yase mityaisa uvari uya vasya yastehe practice twam niyoksya. If you do not act according to my conditioned direction and do not fight, then you'll be falsely directed by your nature. You have to be engaged in warfare. And in the next verse, it continues. It says that under illusion, you are now deciding. And Lord Krishna continuously. And when you go on in that verse, by the time it gets to the climax of the Bhagavad Gita, 1866, he said, what? Surrender unto me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But how can one surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead? That symptom, how one can surrender, is given in Bhagavad Gita chapter 18, text number 54, wherein Lord Krishna says that what? Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, na Soshati, na Kankshati, Samasaveshu Bhukteshu, Madbhatim Labate Param. This is the platform of a Brahmana. When one comes to the platform of Brahma, what is his symptoms? Such a person is transcendentally situated. And because he's transcendentally situated, he realizes Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He becomes joyful. That is the position of the living entity, who is a Brahmana. When one has become a Brahmana, the natural inclination is that he becomes joyful. That is the result of becoming a Brahmana. Because why? He knows what to do. He knows how to do them. And among the 12 qualities of a Brahmana, it is emphatically explained that a Brahmana, he has knowledge. And because he has knowledge, he can discern what is the right activity, what is the wrong activity, what activity should be performed, what activity should not be performed. And such a person not only becomes joyful in this material body, ultimately he attains the ultimate joyful state of Krishna consciousness, attaining the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he goes back home, back to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his life, at the end of his life. So in the purport of the verse we're reading to, the purport concluded in the purport by saying that only by good luck does such a mentally meet a self-realized soul like Vidura, and by his instruction gets rid of the descendants of material existence. So by dint of good fortune, like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Brahmananda Brahmite Kone Bhagavan Jiva, Guru Krishna Prashade, Pai Bhakti Latabija. If one becomes fortunate, it makes a great personality in his life. Each and every one of us on this platform have been fortunate like that. We have come to the opportunity or to the platform whereby we've been able to meet great personalities. We have come into the fold, the family of Srila Prabhupada, where we have the opportunity, we have the perfect boat, we have the perfect captain, we have the perfect weather to go back home, back to Godhead. And if we, after having all of this, we still fail to be able to attain Godhead in this one lifetime, then we're unfortunately a kripana. And that is what we should not become. That is the essence of this verse, that in any situation, in whatever circumstances, we should never become a Maisali person, a kripana, as described in the verse. Thank you very much for listening. And I would like to stop here. Basically, the verse is talking about the qualities of a Maisali person, kripana, and a Brahmin. And then we explained in the course of the lecture using various examples like Arjun, King Naranja, the story of King Naranja. Chaitanya Prabhu is here. He's very expert in narrating that story of so looking at several personalities in the scriptures, we've heard that it is completely absurd or unfortunate if one remains a Maisa. And in summary, we ended up explaining that one should become a Brahmana. A Brahmana is one who is in knowledge. There are 12 qualities of a Brahmana, but above all of them is that is knowledge. And what is knowledge? He has the knowledge of Brahma. You understand, like Papa said in the purport, he has knowledge of Brahma. And because he has that knowledge, he is situated on that platform. And on that platform, what does he do? Ma bhaktim labate param. He engages in devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because he engages in such activities of bhakti, which Krishna has already stated in the Bhagavad Gita, that one who engages in such activities, he can know him as standing in his two-handed form of Krishna. And one who sees Krishna will go to the abode of Krishna and remain with him eternally. That is the promise of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Salika Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Lots of scriptural references to support your lecture. At this point, we ask devotees whatever questions, comments you may have, please indicate that by using the hand emoji, and then you'll be asked to unmute. Shri-Bhuvanath Prabhu, Hare Krishna, please go.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare well.
Shri-Bhuvanath Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Jai Salika Prabhu ki Jai.
Hare
Thank
Krishna,
you
thank
for your wonderful thought. Your thought on this particular sloka is wonderful. I have one comment and I have one question, which is application for us. The comment, first of all, if we look at the sloka, there is a word in the sloka there, pariti. And Srila Prabhupada, in his breaking of the sloka, it translated to be dwindling. But you'll be surprised, Chakravarti Vishwananta Chakravarti said, wasting away, not only wasting away, he stressed it in the sense that he said it's like two copra. Copra means two pieces of cloth, just like our dhoti. We have the charger and we have the dhoti. So no matter how we stick to the dhoti, no matter how we stick to the charger, it is So how does this apply to our practice, Prabhu? This is the question.
Thank you very much for that example, the comment, and leading to the question. Actually, it's interesting. That is actually the line of thought we're trying to explain, that the fact that we in Krishna consciousness doesn't make us being free from the designation of a Kripana. Because sometimes devotees are so proud, having come into Krishna consciousness, then we think, oh, we have arrived, so we are devotees. But sometimes we be in devotional service, but not in Krishna consciousness. How to be in devotional service and not be in Krishna consciousness is what is explained in the comment that you gave. That a devotee sometimes, we see it happens. When we joined the movement, none of us wanted to be a temple commander, a temple president, a regional secretary, or what have you. We never wanted to be any of this. But in the course of devotional service, just like Maharaj Bharat, he knew by knowledge that attachment to the bodily extensions like brothers, properties, kingdom, money, are all detrimental to part of spiritual life. And he renounced all of them. And also, he has all of this knowledge and he took to the path of self-realization. But funny enough, in the course of doing that practice, because it is only natural that, like Gurudev will use the example, a one who does not get examined until he becomes a student. The moment we become a student, automatically the path of question examination opens before us. So while we become a devotee, when we take to the path of Krishna consciousness, when we start chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, a devotee should constantly remember that these angers of attachment will come in different forms. It will come in different forms that we never will think about, because Krishna knows what our knowledge of the scripture is. So it will come in such a way to give us elevation, and we see it spread across the scriptures in the life of so many devotees, that even a slight inattentiveness can dissuade even a great transcendentalist. So, giving the example of Srila Vaishnava Chakravarti Thakur, as you said, our dhoti is one thing. And I remember, it happens to us every time. I have one dhoti, actually, one devotee brought for me that dhoti from India, and amazingly, up till now, it happens in our lives. This dhoti was like, the dhoti was so nice that I had to cut out of the dhoti. So those long type of dhoti, I sewed a quota out of it instead of using the shada. So I use it as a dhoti and quota. And then as you were speaking, I was just remembering, this dhoti has been almost like about, if I'm not mistaken, 10 years or plus now. Wow. I've been using this dhoti. And it has got a strength in that this dhoti has become so weird that when I tie the dhoti, it starts tearing. And you know that kind of tearing, it's not tearing where there is a sewing. It's just because it is weak. The dhoti is very weak. It's just busted once I tie it. And I kept on sewing this dhoti, keeping on wearing the dhoti, even up to now. And I think that was last week. My wife was telling me, he said, when are you going to throw away this clothes? What is it that is in this particular dhoti? I'm no longer going to wash this dhoti. I'm going to throw it away. And I said, please don't throw that away. I just like that dhoti. This is how it happens. When we do not literally think that we're becoming dissuaded in the path of Krishna consciousness, slight things increases our attachment. So that was a wonderful example. But how it applies to us in Krishna consciousness is that every aspect of our lives gives an opportunity to either grow or dissuade us on the path of Krishna consciousness. And it happens in so many ways, in terms of management, in terms of attachment to books, reading too many books, like Srila Prabhupada Goswami said in the scriptures. Sometimes because we want to become scholarly, we want to be known as a very Paka devotee who knows the scriptures, we read so many books, and then at point in time become confused about reading, and that we lost the essence of bhakti. And we see so many devotees are falling apart on the path of Krishna consciousness due to that. even in the presence of Srila Prabhupada, there are devotees who join him, and you can imagine such a Mahabhagavad to attract his soul. And they challenge him openly that Prabhupada, this thing, of course, of all you said, we can accept this, but this certain aspect we said, we cannot accept it. And they leave the movement, not to other followers, but even to Srila Prabhupada's statement. So this happens. So in our devotional lives, we should be conscious, and the only way to be conscious is to constantly read, as it is said, the books that our acharyas have given to us, because several examples are there to remind us. Thank you for reminding me. Maybe I'll stop using that duty from today.
Thank you, Prabhu. Respect, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
So, Tribhunath, thank you for the question. Salika Prabhu, thank you for the answer. Oladimeji, Hare Krishna, please unmute.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for the lovely presentation. My question is about the Maisa philosophy. We always see it around us on a regular basis, especially our popular and the common politicians that we have these days. And it is very, very difficult. My question actually is, how do we tell them or propagate to them that you have all the signs that the whole material body is going to an end, but they do not see it that way. You know, we have different presidential candidates right now, and it's very mind-boggling when they keep going, and it's so obvious that there is no likelihood that they will do this. They will get to that position. But how do we tell them or pass such message to tell to them that it's ending? They should be preparing themselves for the next life or for the next stage of life. So my question is, how do we tell them as a devotee that, or preach to them? Actually, they listen to preachers, they listen to different religious leaders, but you will not see that sign the way they act and the way they live. How do we go about this?
Thank you very much for this beautiful question. It's a very wonderful question, actually. Thank you very much. We can answer this question in two ways. Before Srila Prabhupada came to the West, 1965, there were no devotees. And when Srila Prabhupada came to the West, what was the strongest tool Srila Prabhupada used in changing the life of the Westerners and bringing about so many devotees we see in the world today? Prabhupada lived by example as an individual. His eating habits, his wakeful habits, his talking habit, his compassionate relationship with devotees, both those who are surrendering, those who are well-wishers. Several scholars were coming to Srila Prabhupada. And the uniqueness of them is that Srila Prabhupada, by his personal self, was able to capture them because of his life exemplary act. And when Srila Prabhupada, we've seen that when he meets some big top politicians, when he speaks, they listen to him. Why? Because Prabhupada has the potency that is carrying within him. And because of that potency, he was able to convince them, because he himself is a perfect example of what he teaches. In our society today, our inability to affect our society in a larger way is as a result of our inability to create an exemplary community that reflects our philosophy. Yes, we have a beautiful philosophy. We have all the solutions to material problems. The teachings of Bhishma Dev to Maharaj Yudhishthira alone, if we make that into a drama and show it on a TV series on the TV, you see the Christians, they have a way. They have this TV session.
Seems Salika is frozen.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me? Hare Krishna. Can you hear me, Prabhuji?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, okay, good. Okay. So I was explaining that our inability to affect the society at large is as a result that even though we have the perfect philosophy, we have the perfect knowledge, but we don't have a perfect exemplary community that can relate what we have to offer the society. And that is why Srila Bhakti Maharaj, our dear spiritual master, was constantly shouting. He was constantly preaching. I remember as back as I have one letter of his which he wrote in 1992. I keep that letter to the core of my heart, where he was explaining that in the next 20 years to come, that our system will not be the way we are seeing it now. And for us to be able to make it relevant to the society, we must have been able to develop a kind of a community that will be attractive to the society. We have not been able to do that. When we look at our management situation, it is not an enviable situation. We give birth to children. They are not attracted to even be in our movement. What to talk of people who are not in the movement. We go on the TV, we preach a wonderful philosophy. We go, like you said, we talk to even individual politicians. But when these politicians do not see that reflections in our lives, they won't do it, even if they want to, because the potency is not there. So our ability to be able to change the society will start when we have a exemplary community that reflects the teachings of our scriptures as it is being given by our acharyas. I remember in 2004, blessed memory Pandit Das, one of our god brother. Some of you on the platform might know him. In 2004, sometimes in 2004, before our Gurudev left the planet, he was already diagnosed to be having melanoma cancer there. And there was a situation that we had within ourselves. I was there, some other group, but I will not mention names. Professor Pandit Das was a professor. He was the VC of, as at that time, I think he was the acting VC of University of Benin. And we had an issue among us, the devotees, especially the leaders. And we went to him. It was because he was a member of the management committee of Benin Temple. So he was there in that meeting. And then all of us were talking. We were explaining what we had to explain. And Pandit Prabhu was initiated as Pandit Das. His name is Professor Oko. And he said something that I will never forget till I quit this body. I was so ashamed to the extent that I felt like entering the ground when he uttered that statement. And what did he say? We said so many things. And not many of us were so egoistic that we're not ashamed to express our so-called concern. And when we finished explaining, Professor Oko or Pandit Das said, he said it is so disheartening. These are his words. He said it is very disheartening for me. I'm the most junior person among all of you sitting here. And I see what you guys are doing now a lot in the secular society. In my circle of lecturers and the politics of the education, we see all of these kind of things. And we want to go out of it with joint Krishna consciousness. We took initiation, taking a step further. But seeing this kind of thing among all of you brings me a very disheartening situation. He said, I feel so ashamed because what all of you are saying, whatever explanation you all of are giving in different capacity, in different ways, simply reflects something to me that you are all doing power tussle. And he said this power tussle is very, very common thing to find in a secular society where we're coming from. But I'm so disheartening that I can still find this kind of power tussle in the community of so-called devotees. So this is the reality. Our inability to affect the politicians, the society at large, is as a result of what we exhibit in our day-to-day devotional practice. So if we want to change it, situation, we have to community, as given by our acharyas. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he has written so many books, and in several of his books, he has talked about how we can change the dynamics of the world simply by imbibing the culture of Krishna consciousness in our talk, in our actions, in our relationship, among ourselves, as a way of affecting the larger society. This is what my line of thinking is in respect to your question. I don't know whether I answered your question, Ladimeji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Anandini.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Yeah. Anandini Danam.
Anandini.
Yes, please unmute.
So yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhu, thank you.
Thank you very much.
My humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for a nice presentation yesterday on the Zoom platform. When we are
Thank you.
trying to
Thank you.
Okay, Hare Krishna, Prabhu, my concern is, we are talking about the Dhrashta here. And somewhere, the Prabhupada said, yeah, then you have only one Dhrashta. But now you have so many. And I must attest to the fact that I am one of that such Dhrashta. And having said this, I'm trying to link this to what is happening in Ukraine right now. Can we have devotee Dhrashtas? Because on this platform, several times Kavichandra Swami Maharaj come on this platform preaching, thereafter guide us as to how we can live as a devotee. I'm talking about our family communities. You see, so my question here is, can we have devotee Dhrashtas? Because they have been guiding us all this while, but we are not taking it. So are we not having devotee Dhrashtas here? Of which I'm one of them. That is one.
Thank you very much for your question. Actually, you're right. In Kali Yuga, like it's also stated, another example, during the time of the appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there was only one Jagai and one Madai. But in Kali Yuga, there are millions and trillions of Jagai and Madai, especially in the consciousness. Yes, your statement is perfectly right. Even in devotee community, if you go to the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, can't remember the verse down. In one of the purports there, Srila Prabhupada said that in Kali Yuga, people would come to a spiritual organization, work so hard, take the role of sannyasis. They will become a sannyasi, and you know what it takes. You're in the movement now to grow from a bhakta to a first initiate, second initiate, to become a sannyasi, just to become able to perpetrate their demoniac tendencies. So the scriptures have said it. Yes, in Kali Yuga,
Record progress.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So in Kali Yuga, it is not too surprising. Like I always say, it is like looking for a drop of water in an ocean to find the kind of mentality of Dhrashta, even in the devotee community. It is not so surprising. That is the symptoms of Kali Yuga. These are the situations in Kali Yuga. So therefore, It's not too surprising, uncommon to find such a quality or personality even in the part of devotion and service. But what is most important is that as an individual, we should, as much as possible, try not to be the Sarastra. That is what is most important. That is the essence of this class, that we should not become a Kripana, we should become a Brahmin. And how to become a Brahmana is very simple in this age. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made it so nicely easy. Just by hearing Nasta aprayesu abadresu nityam bhagavatam sevaya Bhagavati Uttamans Loke Bhakti Bhava Naistiki. That prayer will recite before the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Just by giving oral reception, the potency to be able to chant the holy name of the Lord will develop. When we chant the holy name of the Lord, we become purified because we associate with the holy name of the Lord. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur says that even in Namabhas, the holy name of the Lord has the potency to give us purification. And when that chanting goes on consistently with sincerity of purpose, Krishna said how he's going to do that in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, verse 11. Tisham Ivanu Kampa Atam Aham Agyanam Jantama. Nasaya mi Atma Bhavasto Gyana Dipina Bakswata. Krishna says, I dwelling in the region of the earth because I know where this thing is hidden. He said, I will destroy that darkness with the shining lamp of knowledge. And that knowledge is coming from what? From this oral reception to Srimad Bhagavatam. Because what we constantly hear, we develop them naturally. So by giving oral reception to this Srimad Bhagavatam, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, our Disarastra qualities are reduced. The Kali Yuga, Kala Sudra Sambhava, everyone in Kali Yuga is a Sudra. In fact, in Kali Yuga, we have worse than Disarastra, because Disarastra, although it was so miserly, but its miserliness was nothing compared to how miserly we had in Kali Yuga. So we can avoid it. We should avoid it. We should become a Brahmin. That is what Srila Prabhupada has given this movement for. And he didn't compromise in saying that when he came to the West. He said, we have started this Krishna consciousness movement to do what? To create association of Brahmins, to make Brahmanas. So we should become Brahmanas and help the society. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Salika Prabhu. In answering Oladimeji's question, I just wanted to add to what you beautifully said, and that is, in this material world, it is said that if one is very much afraid of death, if one is very much concerned about death, then one cannot really enjoy this world. And so the materialists, they don't care very much about death. So that is the problem. That's why they are unwilling to give up. They are unwilling to retire until death comes and then kick them because they don't care about death. For us as devotees, we very much care about death. So everything we do, we are very mindful. So Sri Chaitanya Prema Prabhu, please, you may unmute.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you, Salika ji.
When the teacher wants to ask the student a question, then there is an issue.
Thank you very much for doing justice to this topic. Very nicely. I just want to support what you have said, that actually there are so many Dhritarashtra's, there are so many Jagai and Madais now. So it is not a surprising thing. But what is surprising is, in the midst of all these Jagai and Madais, one is trying to become a devotee. So to see that those qualities in people is just a commonplace. But let us, having seen that, let us try to make a difference individually. Let us try to become the change that we want to see in others. So it should be a call for personal application. Individually, we are saying we don't want to become. So let us become the example that we want to see in others. So this will be where our focus is. So please don't be disturbed by all those things you are seeing. Even in the times of our great chariots, those kind of things have been happening. All kinds of bad elements. He said, yes. But our chariots, they remain, situated. They remain undaunted. The more the onslaught of Maya, the more they stood, just like the Sataka bird. The more the thundering, the more the lightning, the more the Sataka bird positions himself, because he knows that very soon the rain will start falling. The Sataka bird drinks only water that comes from the sky, the cloud directly, not the one that has touched the ground. So the more the rumbling of the cloud, the more the lightning, the more he positions unshakably. He situates himself there waiting for the rainwater, because he knows that by this lightning, the rain is about to drop. So when we see a lot of distractions, we should just use that as a position, as a chance to position ourselves with more determination, trying to become the example we want to see in others. So this will be our focus. Anandini Danam Prabhu. If we do that, very soon we'll become very exemplary, and our life will become channels for positive change, and our life becomes inspiration for others. So in the midst of the darkness, there is still hope. Let us become that hope. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you so much, Chaitanya Prema Prabhu. And Sri Ganga, I know you have your hands up, but Govinda Prabhu had his hand up. He did not use the hand emoji. So we'll go to Govinda Prabhu and we'll come to you, Ganga Prabhu. Sri Govinda Prabhu, please unmute. Is Govinda still there? Yeah, please unmute. You are muted.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, that's about pronouns. All glory to go there. All glory to
Hare Krishna.
my question that you know. Chaitanya Prabhu has elaborately explained everything, and that actually satisfies my question. Yeah, because we see the speaker gave an answer of paying attention to the oral section of Srimad Bhagavatam, which serves as an antidote for us to kill the intellectual qualities in us.
I think Govinda Prabhu's network.
Yeah, network issues.
Yeah, maybe we can listen to Ganga.
Yeah, we can.
Ganga Prasad.
Ganga Prasad, please unmute.
Let's wait for chastisement first.
Govinda should come back and take care of him.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Dandava Pranam.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you to everybody in the platform, and to our late Prabhu SALIKA here. I'm not a chastiser, and nor do I intend to become one now. I appreciate every aspect of the lecture, and very informative. While you were answering one of the questions, you made mention of something that irked me or give me some kind of concern. You said the reason why we are not imparting in our society is that we don't have community where we can exemplify what we preach. And I became a little bit concerned. And so if we want to impact or influence, does it not start from individuals and then it becomes a community thing? Just like one poet said, you cannot change the universe, but you can improve on one aspect of the universe, and that unit is you. So is it the community first or the individual that should be our primary concern? Taking an example that during the Gaudiya March, Prabhupada was a member of the Gaudiya March, and sannyasis were sent to UK to preach Krishna consciousness. Can you hear me?
I'm hearing you clearly.
We can hear you.
Yeah, but then it took only one Prabhupada to change the narratives of the world and not community per se. So I needed a little bit of clarification in understanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for the question. Yeah, you are perfectly right when you said changes start from an individual. But when you look at the context of the question that was asked, individually, and actually, I tell you, this is one of the greatest challenges that we have in the world of our ISKCON movement, especially here in West Africa. We have so many individual devotees who are striving like anything, who are doing wonderfully as an individual devotee. But when you talk about the social stratas or when we talked about nationhood, when we talked about statehood, when we talk at that level, it is very difficult to find an individual influence in such a situation. If the question was directed differently, maybe the response would have been different. But here we are talking about nationhood and the influence on what the society should be based on the individuals that are aspiring and are also aspiring or taking the role of leadership. Because we are talking about a national leadership here. And national leadership, yes, as an individual, Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, as in his life, he has shown how powerfully an individual can influence. In our individual effort as his disciples, we are all touching lives in different ways. But the same acharyas have told us, and that is what Srila Prabhupada also said, that for us to affect the larger society, we must have a reflection of what we are preaching. Individually, anywhere you go to, whether it is in West Africa, whether it is in Europe, whether it is in America, when you ask an individual opinion about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, anyone will tell you this is a perfect philosophy. And when you ask questions about are there practitioners of this platform, this principle of Krishna consciousness, yes, people will tell you there are these specific devotees. We glorify Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, we glorify Bhakti Dhira Maharaj, we glorify Ganga Prasad Prabhu. But where is that community that reflects our philosophy as a social entity that can affect or explain what a social system should be? And that is where the acharyas have continuously emphasized. And I did mention in the answering of that question, as far back as the late 80s, early 90s, the spiritual masters have been emphasizing this, that it will no longer be possible for us to get the kind of reception we are getting as at then if we do not create a kind of a community that would directly impact in the society. When you look at the development of Christian missionary did not develop based on the fact that it was because they created community, they created schools, they developed families. Our families, there's a lecture that Shlabati Tamara gave in London sometimes. When you look at what makes a society, the family, it is almost becoming an embarrassing situation when you look at the divorce rate, even in our own ISKCON. Those microscope units that makes a society in our own society are nothing to write home about. Yes, we have individual devotees, and we can continue to be individual devotees, but that is not the vision of our Acharya. Srila Prabhupada came, yes, we mentioned it in our lecture. Srila Prabhupada came, he made an exemplary act. We are also making, but we are not Prabhupada. We should never misunderstand this. I'm not Prabhupada. Even though I'm able to preach, I'm able to affect individually, but to affect in a mass level, at a national level, at a state level, we need a kind of a community where people will come into and be able to get even our individual preaching. You and I can attest to this fact. It has become even a very burden on me as an individual when I preach to people because of the online presence. I have these several experiences. I don't want to mention names, but I can mention temples. I've sent several people to different temples in Benin, in Enugu, in Lagos. And the moment those people who are very enthusiastically taken to the part of Krishna consciousness online, by taking to the chanting, by reading our books, the moment they get into our temple, they get fried out. We cannot shy away from this. We can individually become a devotee, but that is not what our Acharya wanted for us. Our Acharya wanted us to do what? Srila Prabhupada built a house for a whole house to do. That is why he created Mayapur, to be an example. Each and every of our temples should become Mayapur. When people go from Nigeria or from Europe, anywhere, they go to India and they get into Mayapur, they stayed in our facility for a week, they become captured by the mood of Bhakti. You have been to Bhaktivedanta Hospital. That hospital, no living entity will enter into that hospital and come back the way it is. And that is why you see, people have been doing statistical research. Why is it that we have more people joining in India than in West? Sometimes people say it is because the philosophy start, or the scriptures, or the origin of Krishna consciousness in India. That is not the truth. Because we still have those facilities in India where when you get into that environment, you get captured. Why is Srila Radhanath Swami Maharaj project is an exemplary one in the world? Because when you get into that society environment, you've been there, you were brought up from there. When you get into the Eco Village Center, the atmosphere is completely different from being here. So we cannot shy away from that fact. We cannot individually make it because we are not Prabhupada. Prabhupada can do that. But it is left on us. The responsibility on our shoulder as individual leaders is that what? We should cooperate together. That is what Srila Prabhupada said. That if we cooperate together, that is what Bhakti Maharaj said. This is what Radhana Maharaj said. This is what all of the gurus are saying. That if we have to come together, and I remember before I round up this answer, I remember one nice story in this regard that Srila Radhana Maharaj said about the red, what is the name of that tree? They grow in some particular part of in the US. He said those trees, redwood, thank you very much. Yes. He said, he gave an example of the redwood, that the redwood, when they go, unlike others, they don't go just like, they look for the root of other ones and they hold on to it, and it becomes difficult to pull them down. So our inability to affect, Prabhu, I still emphasize, I still maintain the fact that it is because we don't have that kind of community that can embrace people. We need an environment of love to bring about, to love the process of Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, we'll continue for like this for ages. And I mentioned, even our own children are not so comfortable with our system as it is. What to talk of outsider, our own biological children, they don't want to be a devotee. Because why? They do not see that in the movement, which will make them want to commit their lives to it. So we should understand this, that yes, individually we should try. We are all trying. I can see, I mean, despite all of the challenges that you have, the kind of preaching you're doing, I'm doing, Saade Prabhu is doing, everyone is doing. But this will not help us to be able to change the society if we want to be realistic to ourselves. Hare Krishna. I hope I didn't go too far. Please chastise me if I've said something wrong because of answering the question.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the honest answer you gave. Shri Govinda Prabhu, if you're there, you can unmute and then.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Ganga Prasad, do you want to follow up?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, Salika Prabhu.
Okay.
I 100% agree with you. My emphasis is not that you are wrong, but I'm thinking like when Tribhuvanat was mentioning about application. Application can be collective, application can be individual also. That's the area I'm talking of. We want to have a community of people who can exemplify. It has to start from individuals, and when individuals come together with one purpose, otherwise we can have communities, like you are saying, we have community and people have divergent conducts. Automatically, it will not give the effect that is wanted. So there has to be conscientious efforts on individual part and also on community part to be able to showcase what we are speaking about. That is my angle of reasoning. I'm not saying you have any defect in your pronouncement. I'm just saying how it can be achieved, the achievability or the application. Okay, otherwise it will just be in the air like theory and it never gets effected. I don't know.
Thank you very much, Babu. I think we're saying the same thing from different perspectives. I did not think or assume that you said that it was wrong. What I understood from your question was that you want me to emphasize more on the community aspect. Yes, the foundation is the individual. So for you to make a community, you need the individuals. Then the individual will become a family. The family will become a community. The community will become a state will become a nation. So I understand your point perspectives. But when you ask the question, my understanding of the question is that even despite the fact that we need to start by individual, which we all are trying in our different capacity, but there must be a synergy at one point. So we're saying the same thing, coming from different perspectives. Thank you very much for the contribution, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Shri Govinda, if your audio begins to disturb, then you can turn off your video, but you can speak now. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I think the question is already answered. So it's
already
okay.
answered. Okay. All right.
It's elaborately explained by different devotees. So it's answered. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, what I want to add to, well, this is the privilege I have as the host. I get the opportunity to chip in what I want to say at what point I want to. And one thing I want to say is, like, I remember when we used to go on Harinams in Ghana, sometimes we'll go with Shri Chaitanya Prema. And we had this habit that every night before we go to sleep, we will read from Srimad Bhagavatam. And it was so enlivening because, and I am saying this because before you answered Shri Chaitanya Prema's question, you were saying, oh, he knows so much about this story about Puranjana. You know, he was the first person I learned the Puranjana story from when we were.
He's a carrier of that stories.
Yes. But also to say something about the answer you gave to His Grace Ganga Prasad Prabhu. I think, like you said, you both are saying the same thing. But one thing I also diverge a little bit from what Ganga Prasad was saying is that, of course, every individual has to try to live the change we want to see in others and in the world. But it does not begin from the individuals. It begins from the head. Srila Prabhupada has given this analogy so many times. We have this human body we have the head. The head controls all the other parts of the body. So if my foot hits a stone I may blame my foot, but I have to blame my head because I did not think and I did not see. That is why my foot hit the stone. Ganga Prashad Prabhu himself once was talking about Kenenimi. Kenenimi, everybody knew he was very wicked, but because of his disciplinary actions, there was practically no crime in his kingdom. We hear about King Rajaram. Because of his piety, everything was flourishing in his kingdom. Yudhishthira, Parikshit, that we're talking about. So oftentimes when it comes to blaming, the leadership do not want to accept the blame. But when it comes to controlling, the leadership is ready to control. So if the leadership is ready to control, they should equally be ready to accept the blame. And that is why I, for one, do not like any leadership position, because it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to be a leader, because when things fall apart, you're going to be blamed. When things go well, you're going to be glorified. And if one is not ready to accept both glorifications and blame, then do not accept the role. So the fact remains that we all want to see our movement grow. We all want to see ourselves grow as individually. But if we have a competent head, the competent head can help guide the rest of the body. That is what I have to say. But I have a question, actually. What I said is just a contribution, but my question is, the verse you quoted, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 8, verse 9, about Bharat, King Bharat, how he developed attachment to this deer. And he gave a very wonderful philosophy, you know, as to why he has to care for this deer. And he suffered for that. Now, my question is, we hear from the scriptures also how Maharaj Yudhishthira, you know, the Pandavas, their demise, the Pandavas, they all died, but Maharaj Yudhishthira, he went to heaven with his party, and he had a dog following him. And he didn't know this dog. Out of nowhere, this dog was following him. So up to the point that when he had to ascend to heaven, he was going to go to heaven with this dog. And then he was asked to leave the dog behind. And his argument or debate was that, how can I leave the dog behind? I did not go looking for the dog just came to look for me. And if you're not ready for me to go to heaven with the dog, then take your heaven. I'm not going to heaven. So Maharaj Yudhishthira went to heaven in his physical body with the dog in its physical body. So what is the difference between Maharaj Yudhishthira holding on to this dog and going to heaven with this dog, and Maharaj Bharat taking care of this deer and being punished to take the body of a deer? What is the difference? Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Very simple question. Beautiful question. Sadhu Prabhu has a way of asking question that is very deep. Thank you very much for this beautiful question.
Very well.
But it's a simple, actually, question in the sense that it explains why in the part of spiritual life, even in material life, one is always constantly required to follow in the footsteps, not imitate. The difference is that Maharaj Yudhishthira personality, Maharaj Yudhishthira is Dharmaraj. And his situation, when we look at the pastimes of the great personalities, we can imitate them. As individual practitioner, in Maharaj Bharat's case, Bharat is not in the category of Maharaj Yudhishthira. And when we look at the purport of the verse I quoted the beginning, immediately after I started chapter 2, text number 7, when Arjuna asked a question, Prabhupada said, when he talked about the perplexity, in the next sentence, he said that in every step there is a perplexity, and therefore it behooves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. So one must constantly, as long as one marriage judiciary, his position cannot be imitated. But the story of King Barak explains King Barak cannot be equated with his position in any case. So in the part, if one wants to become successful in life, one cannot the previous acharyas or representatives of God. One has to follow in the footsteps. And that is why Maharaj Yudhishthira's case was different. He was able to go, and the philosophy was nicely, and then he was able to take him because he was in a different category entirely. But King Bharat has to take another body because why? It's on a different path. So for one to be able to, in that verse, it is explained that one should take, and Krishna himself says this, one should take shelter of the bona fide representative of God and ask questions always. So at any point, in other words, it means that at any point, unless one is a Nitya Siddha, eternal associate of the Lord, like Maharaj Yudhishthira, who has come to play pastimes with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one should never try to imitate their activities because they are on a different category entirely. One should follow in the footsteps. And to follow in the footsteps means one has to take guidance from a bona fide spiritual master. That's my understanding. I don't know whether I answered
all right. No, yeah, you did. You did answer my question. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Anyone with anything else to say? See, Prabhuji, maybe you can help me with this also. As aspiring devotees, we are oftentimes told, don't be attached, don't be attached, don't be attached. It's like a rhyme sang into our ears all the time. Don't be attached, don't be attached. Now, what is material attachment really? When we say somebody is attached to something, what does it mean? And what is the difference between when we say somebody is attached and somebody caring? Because like you quoted, I think, Canto 5, where Lord Krishna in the form of Kapila Dev talks about how the 11th entity gets diluted by family attachments. You know, you have brothers, sisters, you have your pet and this, you become attached to them. And so what is attachment? Because if by caring for my son, if by caring for my wife is considered attachment, I don't know. So I do not want to be attached, but it's also my responsibility to care for my family. So I want you to help us understand the difference and what.
Thank you very much. Another nice question. Very beautiful one, Prabhu. Thank you so much for this question. Actually, I don't ask you not to be attached. We should become attached. I gave a lecture some few days ago, and it is a warring community, and every speaker was speaking. And then when it turned to get to my turn to speak, everybody was talking, and do not fight for God, do not fight for God. So when it came to my turn, my opening statement, I said, why is everybody saying people should not fight for God? I said, my statement is that everybody here, you should fight for God. And everybody became my God. They were looking at my face. They were looking at, what is this man talking about? Maybe this is what Hare Krishna philosophy is. So there was a kind of, that kind of thing. And I allowed them to sit down with that. And I said, well, but on one condition, if you have to fight for God, you must know God first. So I say that I'm not saying don't fight. You should fight. But to fight for someone, you must know that person. As long as you do not know that person, God, you have no right to fight. And everybody started busting a laugh. In the same way, in Krishna consciousness, we say don't be attached. Why shouldn't we be attached? Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave us the perfect way to become attached. He said, my wife, my son, my daughter, in his nice song, I don't know that song off it. He said, they're your property. the gopis of the Vrindavan, they were attached to Krishna. And that is where they are glorified. So in a real essence, actually, when we say detachment, detachment means what? To detach from matter. But what is matter? Everything actually belongs to Krishna. So ultimately, when we say don't become detached, actually what we're saying in essence is that we should become attached to Krishna. Because when we become attached to Krishna, we automatically be detached. And that is why in the process of bhakti, there is no rules and regulation. The part of bhakti has nothing to do with rules and regulation. It is bhakti. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't ask for rules and regulations. It's just become what? Just absorb yourself in Krishna. Because when you automatically are connected with Krishna, you become automatically detached to material things. And Prabhupada answered this very nicely in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 13, text number 8 to 20. Maybe let me see if I can get that verse. Prabhupada said, as regards to attachment, when he was given the 20 qualities, probably we can open that for us. Chapter 13, text number 8 to 20. And the purport, you will find the answers to that. So for reference.
13.
Chapter 8 to, I think the verse is 8 to 12 or something like that.
Okay.
13, 8. From yeah, text number 8 to 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they go down, go to the purport. Let's go to the purport.
Okay.
There is attachment is mentioned there, but let's go into the purport. Prabhupada explained this nicely. Gradually, I think, yeah, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, go on. Go slowly, Prabhu.
Here.
Yeah. In detachment, yeah. As far as detachment from children with an home, it is meant that one should have no feelings for this. They are natural objects of affection, but when they are not favorably in spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. The best process for making the home pleasant is Krishna consciousness. If one is in full Krishna consciousness, it can make his home very happy, because this process of Krishna consciousness is very easy. One need only to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Accept the remnant of food offered to Krishna. Have some discussion on books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and engage oneself in the deity worship. These 4 things will make one happy. One should train the members of his family in this way. The family members can sit down morning and evening and chant together Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Now listen to this. If one can mold his family life in this way, this is the conclusion. If one can mold his family life in this way to develop Krishna consciousness, following these 4 principles, then there is no need to change from family life to renounced life. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Very, very appropriate and relevant reference.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Tribhuvannath Prabhu, please unmute. Probably you may be the last person to say whatever. It's almost 2 hours. Go ahead, Prabhuji.
Salika Prabhu, thank you so much for this wonderful time you were giving for address so many questions. So I was just reflecting on the question that just been asked not quite long, the aspect that concern attachment. It just, what are those things that trigger this attachment? What are the things that, when we say attach, what are those things that actually, attracts attachment? I don't know if you get it right, Prabhu. How will you understand what I'm saying?
I'm trying to understand.
Okay.
What are those things that?
You mean like the cause of attachment?
Perhaps maybe a cause or what in human being, So we are talking about attachment. Just for instance, now, okay, a good example I will cite now. We see a magnet. A magnet can attract something to itself. So what are the things that attract this attachment to us?
Thank you very much. Lord Krishna nicely answered that question in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, text number 62 to 65. It explains this very nicely. Krishna says, while contemplating on the subject of the senses, a person develops attachment. From then, he develops attachment for such objects. And so from such object, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. From anger, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material whirlpool. But a person free from all attachment and aversion, able to control the senses through regulative principles of freedom, can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. Thank you very much, Sir Adefugo. So the cause of attachment is as a result. Mind you, in chapter 7, Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna explained to Arjuna that according to Isha Dvisha, according to the living entity falls into the delusion of conditional life as a result of desire and hate. And the moment it comes in contact with the three modes of material nature, what naturally happens is that because it's natural for the living entity to be conscious, and part of the conscious activity is to think, to feel, to will. So that conscious activities of feeling, willing, thinking manifest in object of senses because the living entity now is under the influence of the three modes, having come down due to desire, as Krishna explained to Arjuna in chapter 7. So out of his desire, it comes down. The moment it falls down into this, under this influence of three modes of material nature, then what next happens is that you start contemplating on those sense objects because now it's in this environment. It's just like somebody's eye is covered with rope or clothes and he's taken far away and almost all of a sudden his eyes is open. What it does is immediately is that he starts looking around. He starts looking around. And once he starts looking around, it relates to what he sees. So the living entity is having fall down into the conditional modes of material nature. He starts looking around, and while he's contemplating on what he's looking around, he develops likeness because it is what? Ananda Maya Biasa. His nature is to enjoy. He wants to enjoy. So it is not unnatural for him. He wants to enjoy whatever because it's part of his nature. So as he's looking around, he sees all of these things, he wants to enjoy them. And because he wants to enjoy them, he develops attachment for them. And then all of the other fall down continues from there. And the only way to come out of it, as Krishna says, just surrender unto me. Because you cannot overcome it. Because once you get captured, you are done. You are done for good. So you just remain there. So the only way to come out of it is because the living entity, having found himself in the material environment, cannot on his own now free himself because it is completely beyond his control. The control he has is what? The choice, like they said, between the A, B, C, D of life. The living entity has the C, which is the saving grace. From A, which is attachment. Sometimes this word attachment is used to assumption. When the living entity thinks, sometimes when people say A is assumption, some people say it's attachment. But whatever word you want to use, when we assume or we become attached to the material nature, then what follows? We take birth. When we take birth, what follows? We have a choice in between birth and our death. So the choices we make in between birth and death is what makes us to continue in the ocean of samsara or get out of it. And the Vice says that this is the ABC of life, ABCD of life, sorry. I don't know whether I answered your question, Prabhuji.
I was wondering, how do we relate with your explanation, Prabhu? How do we relate it to this terrestrial phenomenon? How do we relate it with how you have explained nicely now? How do we relate it to the terrestrial, ideas of what we have been, going through this chapter.
Okay. We can relate it in several ways, but one of the ways we can relate it is that this Rastra, although we know his personality from his background, but the point at which we want to take here is the moment this Rastra took birth, having come into the material body, that particular environment of material nature in that particular body, just like I gave an example, somebody who just find himself in a situation, the living entity, when you look back at that story of the chapter 3 of Bhagavad one that I gave example before, when you listen to the description of the living entity, how he enters into the material body, when you look at that story line, gradually until he finds himself into that material body, when he comes into the material body, it is mentioned that immediately he forgets everything. Is really identity. What he relates with is what is around him or her. So once he starts relating with that, then his problem compounds and it continuously. So Maharaj Dhritarashtra, although it's a different personality, but having in this particular context, the moment he took the body of Dhritarashtra, based on his previous Punya Karma or whatever, he started thinking based on the relation to his present body, being blind, being born in the kingdom, being the eldest son. He started relating to all of this because these are the things that are manifested to him. And in that way, because he was meditating on all of these things that has to do with his present birth, born in a royal family, being born blind, not being able to become the king, looking at, I'll give birth to the children, because these are the things that are directly related to that body. So it continuously, and that is why it's described as a Kripana.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
All right, Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. I guess we'll bring the class to a close. It's about 2 hours. And I must say, we thank you all for your patience and contribution and involvement in this class, making it super wonderful. At this point, we ask the devotees to please unmute, and then we chant Big Hare Krishna Mahamantra to express our appreciation to our revered speaker, Salika Prabhu. Jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai. All glories to His Grace Salika Prabhu ki.
Jai.
Vanchakrapata Rubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvasya Patita Nam Pavashnebiyo Vaishnebhiyo Namo Namo.